Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Adam Krautwurst, and with me, as always, in these team previews is Mr. Full-Time Fantasy himself, Jody Smith, and Shawn Childs, the brainchild behind a lot of the rankings and projections that we're going to be talking about tonight. And tonight, we're going to dive into the AFC South. Shawn, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm relieved to get all 32 teams done and the starting projections, and now you can kind of sift back through it and see who's going to be, breakouts, and then look at draft and who you like, and, kind of get your hands dirty on your opinion, and hopefully you can stay healthy and the players perform up to expectations.
Absolutely. And I know you're probably more excited to get done with the AFC South. I'm sure that's a pretty gross division. Jody, I know we were talking last week joking about, I can't wait to dive into the AFC South and then next week. Maybe we'll take the week off, but here we are grinding into these projections. Hopefully we'll talk about some of your sleepers tonight, Jody, if you have any.
Yeah, I know what Shawn was saying. Like on the back end with when your final Seattle picks came in, Shawn, I was like, it just feels like it's the end of a long marathon, and you finally get there. When you're finally putting in the trio of tight ends for the Seahawks, and you're done, you're like, all right, that was quite a project, and I know how much work you put into it, so I know everyone appreciates it.
Yeah, excellent job, Shawn. And now the thing in 2023, projections, you don't have to just do them now. You have to do them before the NFL draft. People are drafting in December for 2023. So it's like they want projections in January and February. So it's not just
the psychos that don't actually have an off season.
That's true. That is true for sure. But awesome. So yeah, we will jump in tonight. We'll start with the Houston Texans. So looking at your projections here, Shawn, CJ Stroud, over 3,600 yards, 65% completions. They're pretty modest, but a huge improvement over, what the Texans have had in the recent past. What do you see in Stroud? Are you a fan? Do you do much I don't want to say film study, but are you just diving right into the numbers with these guys?
Anybody that's a young player, I've watched, some videos. I'm looking for movements, and unfortunately, when you're watching most of the videos, you're getting their best plays. So you kind of like, if it's a running back or a receiver, you're looking how they move the ball, their hands, and the speed of the running back, the quarterback. Is he under pressure when he throws it, or easy pocket, and those are kind of factors. So, read a couple scout reports to get a feel for a profile of them, and then watch a little bit, and then kind of and take it into the offense. So he's a guy that's obviously pretty impressive over the last 2 years. 85 touchdowns, 12 interceptions on a very good Ohio State team. So sounds like he's going to be a very intriguing player for Houston, and hopefully their offense improves in the right direction right in there, especially in his rookie year.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll start right out of the gate, and that's you have him projected to play 95% of the snaps. I think you're absolutely right there. He was my favorite quarterback in this draft class. Great, pocket passer. I lean more towards those pocket passers, and Stroud has that pocket pass ability here. Jody, anything stand out to you about the CJ Stroud projections here?
Well, it's not saying much, but it's a huge upgrade for the Texans and all. What you love about Stroud is the accuracy. I know there's that long history of Ohio State quarterbacks struggling at this level, and then there was the whole thing with that report, the study that came out. I forget the initials of it, that said that he wasn't necessarily processing at the level we'd like, but I think he was Houston's guy all along. This is a team that's going to be implementing a West Coast offense imported from San Francisco. I think it fits his skill set well. And with Stroud, you've got accuracy in the short game and a medium game and a long game. He makes good decisions from all the film and the tape that we've broke down at Ohio State over the last couple of seasons. And I'm optimistic that, they're finally going to, turn the corner. I'm less enthused to what the Texans did with the trading away next year's first, but that's a topic for a different podcast. Overall, I think Stroud has have some potential, and I think if things go well, I think he can contend for like a secondary QB2 for a Superflex league. I think he can get up around QB20 here in season 1.
Yeah, no, that's certainly not out of the range of outcomes. I think I'm off Stroud for this season, not even because of necessarily Stroud, but because he might have the worst weapons in all of the NFL when it comes to receivers. His number one is Woods, and then Mechie and Dell, Nico. Nico is probably he's the guy that I've been drafting out of this group. But we'll get into those receivers in a minute here. But yeah, I could certainly see Stroud finishing as a low end QB2. But even if you go to the full-time championship ADP, full-time fantasy championship over at the FFWC, he's going undrafted. And only 22 quarterbacks are going in those drafts. So super flex drafts, of course, he's getting drafted. So, but yeah, so moving on to the running backs here. I like Dameon Pierce as the guy. I'm the Buffalo Bills native, the Buffalo Bills fan. Singletary was not impressive at all with the Bills, and I see you have Pierce in charge of the backfield here, but only 190 attempts to Singletary's 145. You see that more of a committee backfield there, Shawn?
Yeah, Singletary, as much as he gets a knock, he didn't score a lot of touchdowns and caught some passes, and his yards per rush were pretty good in Buffalo, and they really didn't have a great offensive line, but obviously the quarterback play and the receiving, throwing a lot kind of helped out. But I think he's going to catch some passes, and he won't score a lot of touchdowns, but I think he'll get his chances per game, and it'll be like the hot hand thing sometimes in that backfield. But Pierce played really well in some games, and he kind of disappeared, and he kind of didn't catch the ball a lot late. So the catches, I don't have a ton going to this backfield, but I give Singletary the early edge, anyways.
Yeah, Jody, what are your thoughts on that backfield? Do you have kind of Pierce leading the way there a little bit? You see it more of a split?
I've got a little more going towards Pierce. What's kind of interesting is you feel like when you're looking at the numbers that they probably brought in Singletary to be more than a change of pace guy. He'll come in and he'll probably have entire drives to himself. But the initial thought process is that he is going to be the guy on the third downs in the receiving game, because that's an area that was not very good for Pierce last season. But what's interesting is that's not really a strength, Adam, and you can attest to this. He wasn't really efficient as a receiver. With receivers with 20 plus running backs with 20 plus targets last year, he ranked 39th out of 60. That said, that was actually higher than Pierce. Pierce comes out way better in all the running metrics. When you look over at Pro Football Focus and those, if anything, he was their Pro Football Focus elusive rating. He was RB2. Pretty impressive. Singletary himself, was no slouch in that area. The way I see it is that's the role. I think Singletary probably will be more involved as a receiver, despite the fact that he wasn't efficient. And the biggest thing is that Singletary is really good in pass protection, and that was pretty poor for Pierce last season.
Yeah, they bring over, the San Francisco 49ers, some coaching pieces from over there, defensive coordinator now turned head coach. They like to use, play defense, run the ball. They added an offensive lineman in the second round, Drew Scruggs. Shawn, do you have a kind of a quick take on the O-line? It looks like it's going upward here. Penn State's Drew Scruggs in the second round. Are they a good unit? Are they a great unit? Are they an improving unit? Well, what do you think?
I think that the left tackle Tunsil played pretty well last year. They have 2 other first round draft picks, and the right guard Shag Mason. He's been a pretty consistent player and blocks pretty well in the run. So I think overall, if their rookie comes in this year, I think overall it's a better offensive line than probably last year, and I think it's it helps especially when you got a rookie quarterback coming in. So I liked what I saw there. At least a starting point. And there's a lot of other offenses that are a lot worse than this.
Yeah. Jody, do you factor offensive line grade into your running back rankings or like any rankings for that matter?
Yeah, you do. I actually broke down all the offensive lines last month and posted. I was actually nodding along with everything Shawn said. That's right. I mean, I have the Texans ranked 20th, but I feel like they could actually be better. They have a bad reputation from how poorly they played over the last, 3 seasons or so. So everyone still thinks they're terrible, but 3 first-round picks in the offensive line, not to mention bringing in Shaq Mason at right guard. I think it's a big improvement. And Juice Scruggs was probably going to projected to play their center. I think it's it's an improving offensive line, and that thing obviously is important for a rookie quarterback, keeping him upright and for opening up holes in the running game, regardless of which backs out there. I think, overall the Texans offensive line should be respectable rather than maligned as the reputation that they get.
Yeah, no, I agree. Dameon Pierce, RB20 right now over for the full-time fantasy championship. I'm kind of fading him at that spot. Like talk about, I don't know if he'll get the pass down work, with Singletary there. I don't think they're going to score a lot of points. They're going to struggle to move the ball. And so I'm kind of off of Pierce there, but I think those are the two guys. They're both worth drafting, obviously, even Singletary there. Now, Stroud, you didn't have much rushing here work for Stroud. Is that just because of his college? You kind of projected that over from college, Shawn?
I think he was, over the last 2 years, 79 rushes for 88 yards or something like that. But it sounds like he could run a little bit and break pocket and extend the passing window, but he wasn't looking to run. And it's weird because some of the quarterbacks in the last couple of years, they'll have a lower rushing attempts and they actually make bigger plays in the pros. Maybe it's 2.5 to 3.5, but they just take advantage of some of the plays. So I don't expect much. But
Stroud probably made himself a lot of money in that Georgia game when he actually did let him turn the wheels off and to run a little bit. I'd be really intrigued by him if the Texans or any team would actually kind of open that up and let him do that a little bit more. But that said, Shawn's right that even overall over his career at Ohio State, it's not something he did a lot of.
Yeah, so moving on to the receivers, Shawn, you have Tank Dell leading Houston in receiving yards and Nico Collins fourth on the Texans in catches. Nico Collins has kind of been the guy, just basically, purely off of maybe a talent thing and maybe just a gut feeling for me. How did the receivers here break down for you? How did you kind of project those guys?
Well, Woods is, he last year was coming off an injury, didn't do too much with the Titans in Tennessee. Yeah. So but he is a veteran guy, and before even in Buffalo or before he had a couple of good years around, he was kind of like a 65 catch guy, and not a ton of yards and not score a bunch of touchdowns. So a downgrade in offense has got to be a factor. I don't have him many touchdowns. Was it Menchie? Is that John Menchie?
Yeah.
Pretty good player. Missed last year was some sort of cancer, or something like that. So talent-wise, he was pretty good at Alabama. Yeah, I think that he's still listed a little bit on the injury report, but I think he's a guy that's going to command some looks. And then Collins can make some big plays, and he's kind of like a deep threat and maybe score some touchdowns. But I just thought the Dell guy, Tank Dell, Nathaniel Dell, or the official call there. Yeah. But I think he just brought quickness. He gets open, can catch the ball, can make plays. I just thought that kind of that inside guy is what they were kind of lacking. And I thought that with a rookie quarterback, and it's really interesting because there was multiple teams in this year's draft that added these smaller receivers looking for the Tyreek Hill or even the Philadelphia Devontae Smith. Yeah. And guys that can, have the quickness, can do stuff. So I liked what I saw when I watched him, and I thought he was pretty impressive. So I gave him, more than most, I'm sure. And like I said, Collins is decent, but his resume, even in Michigan, wasn't elite. He was kind of like, that same kind of range. He had chances last year, and he seemed like he definitely last year seemed like he was progressing, but I think there's more people to compete with him this year. So, I took a little stance there, but we'll see. A lot of those things will take, the spring, training, I think baseball, spring training, but training camp news as we go in the summer, will change some of these dynamics of players, whoever's getting the positive reports and who's not. And, if he's connecting with the Stroud or whatever. So it'll be interesting to follow, but I took that stance early.
Yeah. These projections are fluid, especially with these Houston guys, because like you said, we just don't know what's going to go on. I think Robert Woods is like a veteran kind of coached for these receivers, an elite blocker, which they'll probably, that's elite blocker for a receiver. That's probably why the coaching staff likes him. But yeah, I could see it's a great point, Shawn, to kind of keep our ear to the ground during training camp to see kind of who's blossoming, who's getting the first team reps. We don't even know. I mean, Robert Woods, I'm sure will get the first team reps, but after that, who knows kind of what these guys are going to do. The Houston tight ends, they bring in Dalton Schultz in free agency. I wasn't super impressed with him skill-wise in Dallas. I thought he was just kind of a meh tight end here. You have him going for 61 catches for 620 yards and 4 touchdowns. How did you kind of divvy up the stuff between him and the second-year player, Brevin Jordan?
Yeah, he fit really well into Dallas. They had good receivers, and even last year the receivers didn't play that well. But in the past, Schultz would be sneaky underneath, and he showed a little more quickness, and he caught the ball when it was given to him, thrown to him. But this change to a lesser offense, he's going to have more competition for targets if all those 4 receivers, are going to command targets. So I just stepped him back a little bit, but I think he's a good extra, especially for a rookie quarterback, that he gives a little more depth. I mean, realistically, they could have 4 to 5 decent options to throw the ball, and that's not counting the dump off to the running back. So it's an interesting profile because this whole group, like in the daily format, is going to go relatively cheap, but there's going to be times probably when a few weeks into the season where they could surprise. And last year's quarterback there, he passed for Davis Mills. He passed for 300 yards a few times. He played pretty well at home, a couple touchdowns. So you figure with a better quarterback, I think the receiving core is a little better than last year. I think with the whole package, it could be sneaky at times.
Jody, Dalton Schultz leaves one Texas team to go to another Texas team. You're down there in Texas. What are your thoughts on Dalton Schultz?
I like him fine. I don't think he's got a lot of scoring upside. A lot of his value in Dallas came on a team that spent a lot of time in the red zone. And that's where Dalton Schultz value kind of played in. That's not really probably going to happen as much in Houston. That said, I think Shawn's numbers for Schultz are pretty spot on. I have him at 59 catches, 608 yards, and 5 scores. He's going to come in, in that tier, that third tier of tight ends. It's the kind of the one where you're like, well, at this point, I'm just going to sit back and take who's best. But one factor, for me in looking at Houston's offense this year is, we have to keep in mind that this is D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick from San Francisco. So they're bringing that same system in, here from San Francisco into Houston. And this offense last year for the 49ers had 2 running backs on the field for 40% of their snaps. This was second highest in the league. I think only Miami was higher in that regard. What that means is, there's going to be a lot of, which 2 receivers, because that means for a big portion of the time, there's not going to be that third receiver on the offense on the field. So whether it's Collins, whether it's John Mechie, or whether it's Bobby Trees, that's where I'm kind of curious of what I'll be watching here in the next, 4 to 6 weeks, is to see who is on the field for those 2 wide sets.
Yeah, that will be interesting. And I know they're going to be playing probably a lot from behind. This Texans team will be here. And so
it could be favored in this division. You said it was bad, right?
Yeah, it is such a bad division.
No, Jacksonville's got to be favored. But.
Yeah, Jacksonville's favorite, I'm sure. But Schultz, tight end 14, I think that goes what you're saying. Like,
about right.
Like Jody, you just, he's tight end 14 over at, again, with the full-time fantasy championship. He's just in like a tier of, hey, if I wait on tight end, I'll grab him, and I'll grab Higbee, Everett, whoever's kind of there waiting for me. But so yeah, I mean that's I think it's all for the Houston Texans here. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, who are looking to kind of get back to their Andrew Luck glory days. They took a quarterback in the first round, Anthony Richardson, who kind of flew up during the combine process there. Overall thoughts, Shawn, on the Colts taking Richardson, like on his ceiling, his floor. Like, where are you on Anthony Richardson this year? Because there's been a lot of hype on him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Colts out of the gate, they want to feel as though they're contenders and play a veteran quarterback and see where they are, or they want to just go to a rookie quarterback out of the gate. But I think Richardson's a big, fast quarterback, and accuracy is a problem. And kind of when you look at it, he kind of parallels Justin Fields really out of the gate, right? Because that's what, Fields didn't have the receivers, and probably that was part of his accuracy. So they kind of have similar profile, but Fields probably is a lot better passer because he had higher level of success at Ohio State passing the ball. So, can he get those mechanics down, and they can, they got Michael Pittman and a couple decent receivers, but it's not like the Colts have a really, really great receiving core for him to use. So it's going to be him running, and those running yards are pretty important. And we see how impactful those are. I mean, every rush yard's like 2.5 times a passing yard in a lot of these formats. So I just said I put him at 12 to 13 starts out of the gate, gave the first month and see what happens. But like I said earlier, those will change if they announce him as starter. He looks good. He's a tricky, at least out of the gate quarterback for fantasy.
Yeah, he's a guy I love taking. I think he's going around QB 12 in drafts here, but I love taking him, especially pairing him up with Jonathan Taylor and taking him and Taylor and hoping for maybe 25 rushing scores or 25 to 30 rushing scores between the two of them, which would be a crazy high ceiling. But I mean, you figure every rushing score almost will go between the two of them. So I like, he's going QB 12 in the 12th round over at FFWC. Jody, what are your thoughts on Anthony Richardson? I know you probably think his floor is super, super low, but where do you think his ceiling goes?
Well, his ceiling is through the roof. You're talking about the most athletic quarterback that's ever tested. We've never seen a prospect that offers this. You can comp him to Cam Newton from a physical standpoint. You'll remember back, a decade ago that Cam Newton had those same concerns, like would he be a legitimate NFL passer? And yes and no, but it kind of didn't matter because they found an offense that would work for him. I love that Shawn just brought up Justin Fields because there's plenty of times last year that Justin Fields looked like the worst passer in the league, but yet he was still a weekly QB1 simply based on that rushing upside, and that's what you have in Anthony Richardson. Perfect offense with Shane Steichen. We saw Jalen Hurts had those same concerns.
Yeah.
Coming out of college, we were worried, is he ever going to be a legitimate NFL passer? But you know what? He landed in an offense and with a coach in Steichen that was able to completely change the whole offense to fit his strengths. And as he got better, remember, Anthony Richardson only basically had this one season as a starter. Is it possible that he never gets, like most quarterbacks, don't get more accurate in pros? Of course. If anything, that's the most likely outcome. But however, with more experience and with a brilliant coach at play, you absolutely love the upside. I mean, at this point, I'm taking plenty of chances with Richardson. I've just completed a dynasty startup, and I traded up to take him as my QB2. I started off with Mahomes, so I feel like if he's a home run, I just landed a team that's going to be a contender for the next, decade. And that's what you get with Richardson. Like you said, the floor, it's extremely low. I don't feel like Gardner Minshew is really a legitimate threat to do anything more than, start a handful of games and then start making the mistakes and things that, got him ran out of being a starter.
Yeah, you can get Richardson. People are like, oh, QB 12 is too high, but you've got guys like Geno Smith, QB 18, Russell Wilson. I know you're high on Jody, QB 17. You can just take one of those guys also to back him up so that if he doesn't start right away or if he just doesn't look like he's ready, you still have a quarterback that's more than capable. Like that's
a nice insurance policy. If you're the last guy that takes a starting quarterback and you take that shot on Anthony Richardson, if you can afford it on your roster build, be the first guy to take that QB2 and get you a guy like Russell Wilson, a little bit safer option.
Yeah, double tap the quarterback position there. I think that's a great thing there. And like you said, Steichen, like it's so good. Like if their offense might be super efficient for like every fourth down they go for it with the whole like Jalen Hurts, pushing the quarterback forward a yard for all those touchdowns in the Super Bowl and all that stuff. Like Richardson's way more athletic than Jalen Hurts is. Plus you've got Jonathan Taylor at that mesh point for the option. And they have, we were just talking about the Houston Texans. Stroud is a better quarterback than Anthony Richardson, but I would take, all the weapons on the Colts over. I mean, the third receiver on the Colts is Josh Downs. He might be the best receiver on the Houston Texans. So it's like you've got all these weapons, good offensive line. So I like Richardson. I like this offense maybe better than most. Did you want to say something else, Shawn, about Rich?
No, I was just when you were saying they were all better than the receiver.
They might all be. They might all be. But moving on to the running back here, Jonathan Taylor, a guy that, coming off an injury-plagued year last year, he wasn't also very efficient. He was, the 101, 102 in a lot of drafts last year, so very disappointing season for Taylor. How did you project him coming out here with Anthony Richardson also being a running quarterback?
Yeah, they had him down for 22 touchdowns. I mean, running the ball well over 500 times. So, Taylor getting 309 rushes, 35 catches. Like to get him a little bit more, but it's kind of project that when you figure the team's not going to throw I got him for 500 passing attempts. And it would probably, if Richardson started out more games, I think that would fall under there. So, but they have some decent receivers. Richardson, I had 111, but that definitely he plays all the games. He's going to get probably 10 a game. You'd be up there with Lamar and Fields and stuff like that. So, the dynamics are kind of tricky there, but the backup running backs, they're projected for stuff, but they could very easily get weeded out, and Taylor could get more rushes than the quarterback. So, that's a good starting point. But, they need to, score more touchdowns, and I think I have them for 37 for the whole team, and that's not a lot, but there is some, receiving weapons, and if Richardson can make some progress in that area, it creates more chances for Taylor.
Yes, you had him for 309 attempts, 1,577 yards, and 13 rushing scores. Yeah, Moss, Evan Hall, Deion Jackson. I don't think they're obviously a threat to like anything serious for Jonathan Taylor. When you went to projecting stuff like this, Shawn, are you looking at the way that the Eagles were running their offense, like how Miles Sanders did, or because you can bring over an offensive coordinator from the Eagles? How do you kind of project that?
No, I think it's a whole different thing. Taylor's such an elite back compared to what the Eagles had, and they kind of, they mixed and matched running backs in different situations and stuff like that. I just think the structure from Philadelphia having really, really three good receiving options and the way they ran the ball, and like you were saying about Richardson, compare him to Hurts, but the only thing that hurts is, Richardson's a big guy, but Hurts is a pretty physical guy, and he just plows home a lot of those things. Richardson's really, really fast and big, but is their offensive line going to be? Because Philly has an awesome offensive line, and I know the Colts have a pretty good, top end of the offensive line, but I just think the structure is a little bit different there. So I don't view it as that. It's more of like, when you look at last year's stats and stuff like that, who got some carries and stuff like that, and you want to put some upside in, but then you don't want to over project the back end guys if they're not going to get in. But there's always at least the second one, and most of the time for the other running backs on some teams that get playing time, sometimes it's a result of injury. So you kind of want to project the upside rather than just say lower the projection. So he had a bunch of carries 2 years ago, and he's deserving of getting the ball out again this year.
Yeah. Jody, Jonathan Taylor going RB5 right now in the middle of the second round in a lot of these FFWC drafts, right behind Barkley, right in front of Pollard. Is that where you have him in your rankings, or where are you comfortable to taking him there?
I still think he's a solid first rounder. So anytime I can get Jonathan Taylor as anything lower than, say, RB3 in the second round, it's pretty much been an auto click for me. And it's kind of unfortunate because I really wanted to embrace zero wide receiver this year, but apparently everyone else has. So I'm ending up with nothing but running backs. And like I said, I'm getting a lot of Taylor in round two. Listen, a lot of the problems with Taylor, obviously, last year were two different stints with ankle injuries. He just never was right. We still saw bursts of the elite player he was as a rookie, and we still saw it last year. Another problem for the Colts last year was their offensive line was extremely ravaged by injuries. They ended up in 31st in run DVOA. I feel like on my offensive line rankings, they actually came in 15th. They used the first on left tackle Bernard Rahman last year. He actually played fairly well, and this year they used a third on Blake Freeman out of BYU. They kind of fortified that depth a little bit. And then this past Monday, I published the using full-time fantasy strength of schedule tool. The Colts have the 12th easiest schedule for running backs, obviously having 6 games here against the wayward AFC South, can be beneficial, but I expect a big rebound season for him. I think Shawn's numbers are, fairly in line with mine. I have him at 1,372 rushing yards. But the thing is, there's like nobody really established with Naheem Hines no longer being there. There's nobody really established to come in on that third down role and take those looks away from him. So I think Taylor can certainly supplement any of his elite rushing ability with more targets in the game. And the only thing is my touchdown numbers are slightly lower because my expectation is that they're going to use Anthony Richardson around that goal line. So it's probably going to cost, Taylor, a handful of easy rushing touchdowns. But, that said, he's a secured, you can argue him as RB1 still, healthy. And, like I said, he's pretty much auto pick for me in the second round.
Yeah, no, I love him. I'm in a pretty high stakes draft going right now, and I just took him in the second round. And I was super happy about it as the RB6. Chubb stuck ahead of him there as the RB5. So I was happy to take JT there. I like Chubb this year too. But all right, moving on to these receivers. So Anthony Richardson, you got down for, what is it, 57% passing completion percentage. That has to affect a lot of these receiving numbers, right, Shawn?
Yeah, and like it tells you on probably the first set of teams that I base them more on the completion. So if his completion rate lower, it creates less catches and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not so much on the targets that I do on the for each receiver.
Yeah, so you have 70. Best receiver you have here is Michael Pittman Jr., number one receiver here, 75 catches for 941 yards and only 5 touchdowns. That's not something that we're really looking for out of a receiver going in like the fourth or fifth round. All the excitement that we have about Richardson, what he can do for himself, fantasy wise, even what he can do for Jonathan Taylor at the mesh point of like a read option attack. Really takes away from what he's doing for the receivers with, because he isn't that great of a passer. We haven't heard anything, positive yet as far as him coming out of camp. I'm sure he's going to work hard at it, but you can't just assume he's going to get better, day one, week one here. So you really got to kind of kill these receivers. So I've kind of been off Pittman. I've been off Pierce and down. Just a lot of these guys, you just kind of have lower than you would really want them, right?
Yeah, there's just not a lot of completions to go around on this team, 291. And, Pittman's, you could say that A.J. Brown and Smith caught a ton of balls last year, but, the quarter, Hurts was 63 to 65%. So
right.
there's a lot more. And they were willing to chuck it in some games. So I don't, Colts are they're already, they're going to be probably 70 attempts behind on that. Never mind the completion rate. So, yeah, it's just,
Jody, what are your thoughts on this receiving core?
Cautiously avoiding them. Obviously Michael Pittman's going to be the number one guy. I personally have him at a 26% target share. Mix in Shawn. What Shawn said here a few minutes ago was that he had the Colts at around 500 attempts. Do the math there. That's 130 targets for Pittman, which would be 11 fewer than he had last year. So, that feels about right. I think he'll be hard pressed to get 1,000 yards in this offense. That said, he's the only receiver I have really any interest in. Alec Pierce, I think his role's kind of locked in. I have actually Isaiah McKenzie and Josh Downs kind of battling for wide receiver 3 duties all season. I have McKenzie with like 5 more targets, but I actually have Downs with 1 more touchdown and more receiving yards. That said, they're more of, Downs in particular is more of a guy I'm looking at in Dynasty. I'm not that interested in McKenzie or even Pierce at this point, because, at that point, as late as those guys are going in drafts, at that point, you're probably kind of looking for upside, and it's really hard pressed to say that this Indy passing attack will have a lot of upside this season. So I would, rather look elsewhere. Pittman, I guess if you can land him as your wide receiver 3 or maybe your flex option, that's fine. But, again, I don't think Shawn or myself either, have him at 1,000 yards. So, expectations should be somewhat tempered.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Pittman right now going as wide receiver 31, it's not terrible, but I like all the receivers around him. Deontay Johnson, Ayuk, Marquise Brown, Tyler Lockett, Treylon Burks. I just love a lot of those guys better for quarterback reasons, for, offense reasons, and for just, them being maybe even better receivers too. I don't think, Gardner Minshew might even be a better option for these receivers, although he wasn't very good in Philly last year when he had the opportunity. I think those are the only games that Philly was really losing there for a minute, was with Gardner Minshew in there. But he might be more helpful for these receivers than Anthony Richardson is, at least out of the gate. So yeah, I'm kind of fading Pittman, Pierce, and Downs there for sure. Moving on to the tight ends, again, not much to talk about here. Jelani Woods, other than him being like 6'7", he did show flashes last year, but you don't have much here for the tight end position. Shawn, you got 30 catches for 360 yards and 2 touchdowns for Jelani Woods, and so kind of not much to see here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just not. It's just it'll be a 3-way split, and it'd be tough to time, and it's just it'll be a late outlet, on a lot of
athletically. Woods is the upside play here just because of his massive build and all that. But again, we keep reiterating on just the lack of total passing volume in this offense. If we feel like Michael Pittman can't get 1,000 yards, we'll be hard pressed for any tight end. I mean, and they rotate their tight ends a lot offensively in Indy. It'll be hard pressed for any of them to get more than, say, 400 something yards, or to even get anywhere near 40 catches. And at that point, they really shouldn't even be relevant in fantasy football. Maybe as a bye week fill in, or maybe if you're in a tight end premium league and you're streaming guys, you can play them on matchup based week to week against the Texans, something like that. But other than that, not a lot of upside. Yeah,
kind of depressing to look at Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, and Will Mallory or whatever they got going on there. But yeah, so that's kind of all they have going on at tight end. And no one's going to have a career or breakout year probably this year with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. So we'll just move on to something exciting like the Jacksonville Jaguars, and finally a team here that we can maybe get excited about on offense. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight on the podcast. Please like it, share it, subscribe to us tonight. We're giving you guys premium content, the stuff, the numbers that go on kind of behind the paywall here from Shawn and Jody. So moving on to the Jaguars, the quarterback position is pretty much obviously locked up there. Trevor Lawrence taking another step last year to kind of heading towards that elite group of quarterbacks. No competition there. Has some rushing upside. Shawn, you have him projected for 66% completion. Is that higher or lower than last year? Because you say the completions and that generates a lot of the other projections that come out of just that quarterback. Has that kind of been what he's been doing at 66%?
Yeah, he was 66.3 last year. His rookie year was 59.6. So, that number could improve a little bit more. A lot of times when Drew Brees and stuff like that, when they're at the 70%, those guys that throw to the running back, they get those easy catches, and they don't throw enough balls to the running back to push a lot higher. But his overall receiving core is a little bit better, so it could beat that. He could beat that number, and he threw the ball 684 times, and I think I was, probably the team wise threw about 600. So, just a little bit of an increase overall. One more pass per game. I think I have him at compared to last year.
Yeah, 29 touchdowns. Passing, 67 rushing attempts, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think he could even get more on the ground there too. I think there's some kind of room for growth there. He's an underrated athlete. And also, adding a guy like Calvin Ridley to the mix, where you've already got, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram. So, I mean, Ridley, just adding him could help the completion rate from last year go up and make him take him into that next level of passer. Where do you have him, Jody? So right now he's going as QB7, kind of out of that top 6 with Lamar Jackson and Herbert as 5 and 6. Do you see him able to creep up into the top 6 tier, or is he kind of in a tier of his own?
No, I mean, I think the highest that Lawrence could get is QB6. I mean, he personally is a step down, for me, but I just kind of smiled when you mentioned it, because I have him exactly at 67 rush attempts, 310 yards. So it's just funny that Shawn and I came up with the exact same total. Not surprising, but what I like, as a passer, you mentioned the leap in accuracy in year 2, which is what we see out of potential superstar quarterbacks. I find myself in that area of drafts. I generally, when given a choice, I've got a little bit of Trevor Lawrence, but I find myself more intrigued by Justin Fields, just simply based on that massive rushing upside and some of the improvements that the Bears have made around him. It just comes down to a personal choice. But, I like him just fine. I think he's, comfortably, like I said, ceiling of QB6 and the floor is pretty high. QB8 is about as low as you could possibly consider getting him. So, I mean, he's, about one of the safest guys you can get in that tier at quarterback.
Yeah, he's a guy that, like you said, in that kind of, you're looking into the Justin Fields. I won't have much in the bigger drafts this year. I won't have much of any Trevor Lawrence because if I lose out on I love Lamar Jackson, I love Herbert, and obviously the quarterbacks above them. And I just, we talked about Deshaun Watson already and how he has the potential to maybe pop up into the top 3 or 4 if everything goes right there. Fields, Anthony Richardson, who we talked about. I just don't think that I'll be making that move because if it gets to Trevor Lawrence, I'll just wait and take one of these other quarterbacks. And I don't see myself taking like a Calvin Ridley as wide receiver 15 or something where I feel like I need to stack it. So he's a guy that I get it. He's great. He's ascending, but he's a guy I'm probably not going to have a lot of my fantasy teams. But a guy that I might have after tonight, running back Travis Etienne. He's kind of a polarizing player. Was supposed to be this great receiver coming out of Clemson, played with Trevor Lawrence last year, did not have the reception totals we were looking for. In fact, it took him a while to get going before James Robinson was traded. You have pretty big numbers here for Etienne. You've got 1,256 rushing yards, 8 rushing scores, along with 41 catches and another 2 receiving touchdowns, Shawn. Those are pretty big numbers. It's 1,700 total yards, 10 scores for Etienne. What's your process is it telling you here?
It's interesting. I'm like 2 thoughts when you're doing it. Just one quick point about Lawrence.
Yep.
Last year, he only had 3 completions over 40 yards, and I have him for like 7.1 yards per pass attempt. And if he's going to reach to where he's in a good quarterback, he has to get closer to 8.0. And that's going to start with the big plays, and we'll really do it. And the other thing is, like last year, I think in the underdog best ball thing, I drafted, I think I mentioned this earlier, at 150 teams. I had Etienne on 128 of them.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I'm a shove-in guy, so he did not execute late in the season, and it was kind of frustrating as far as the pass catching side of it. It's like, when they brought in the second running back, sometimes they throw to him right away and they wouldn't throw to Etienne. But he had 35 catches and he didn't really have much early on. But for him to reach like one of the top tier running backs, he's going to have to get 50 to 60 catches, and he has to get, give him more chances in close. When they were inside the 5-yard line, they threw a lot and they didn't try to power the ball home. They're looking to throw it or the quarterback to run it in. So it was kind of frustrating. I mean, he had last year 1,400 yards. I mean, it's a slight progression, I think, over last year, especially like you mentioned earlier in the year. He really didn't, get most of the stuff because James Robinson was kind of in the way, and he did the big. It seemed like James Robinson would get on the field, they'd hand him, and he'd break that one long run the first 3 or 4 games. So, yeah. But Etienne's a pretty special player. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet, but as that offense grows, he's going to be a big part of it. And if Lawrence can make some bigger plays and threaten the field, I mean, it's going to help him underneath too. So I like him a lot, and it's weird. He's not a shove-in all-in guy for me this year. I've changed to another running back and a different team, like the 3rd round of drafts. But I definitely will be interested in him, and he needs to. I'm not confident that his touchdowns will be impactful. You need the yards, you need the catches, and you need the touchdown. So he's kind of shaky in 2 areas. I mean, it's not that he's not talented enough. He just has to get him the ball more and give him more chances in close. And that could happen,
Yeah, no, that's definitely a possibility. I've seen enough of, a lot of really good tape guys that I trust coming out of college said he just wasn't a very good receiver. And even recently in the NFL, they're showing that he's just not comfortable. Like, is he a check down guy? Sure. Can he run a swing pass? Sure. But he's not a route runner. He's nothing like that. And I think maybe the Jags know that, and maybe they're just not going to throw him the ball as much because he's just not that good. So that would be my concern there is there's some potential loss. Now, you don't have him for 60 catches, obviously 41. You don't have to be an elite receiver to get to 41 catches. They just have to decide to do it. I just think with all the mouths they have to feed there now with Ridley, Evan Ingram's awesome. Christian Kirk is good. He's obviously still there. I think it's going to be tough for him to reach his full potential there, especially as a receiver. Jody, what do you think about Etienne?
Yep, it'll be hard for him to get into RB1 territory if he has, anything fewer than 60 targets, and that's kind of looking like the way it's going to be here. But as a runner last year, before he kind of slowed down the stretch, overall fourth in missed tackles. He was tied for 8th in red zone touches. He had one more red zone touch than Derrick Henry last year.
Yeah,
he had 14 attempts inside the 5-yard line. That had the potential to be massive, but only Ramondre Stevenson was less effective when it came to punching in those gimme touchdowns for guys that had double-digit carries in the area. A little bit of a concern. That said, I love the upside. The problem maybe for that potential for him to sneak into the top 10 is Tank Bigsby. They just invested a pick on him. Bigsby himself, very accomplished runner. He was 16th in yards after contact per attempt, 50% breakaway rate. And every year at Auburn, he was just getting better and better as a receiver. He caught 30 balls. Last year, it feels like, that's probably a role that he's definitely going to contribute to in year one. I do love the upside of Travis Etienne. I keep snagging him everywhere because to me, he does, even with that usage and in this offense of a team that's this heavily favored to win their division and has such a favorable schedule overall. I feel like there's enough upside and there's enough potential there where I'm interested in him. And just some of the other backs there, don't interest me as much. And Shawn, you just kind of teased a third-round running back.
Casually, just a casual.
Yeah, third-round running back that you're targeting as heavily as you did Etienne last year. So make sure when we get to that episode that
that's right.
Put us in on that one.
Right before
he goes
Vegas.
in the 4th round right now, and I'm sure the wise guys move him into the 2nd by the time I get to him. So I don't know if I'll end up with him later. But I will start drafting the underdog thing. August 1st, I'll get in about 10 slow drafts a day for 15 straight days, and I could have 100 going at the same time.
So hopefully there's spots left at this rate, the way these drafts are filling. But yeah, Etienne's going his RB14 at the 3-4 turn. I guess it's okay. The guys that I would take Gibbs over him. I just think Gibbs has that Kamara rookie upside with the catches his first year, and we'll talk about him. And I like Najee, and if Breece Hall ever fell that far, but I really like you had brought up before you brought up Tank Bigsby. I loved him coming out of college, and the coaching staff has already said that they want to get him the ball. They want to get him involved. I have a ton of Tank Bigsby, so I'm betting on the offense, but I'm kind of betting on the cheaper player here. Tank Bigsby, Shawn, you have for 89 attempts, so really a handcuff roll essentially. Nothing major here for 376 yards. You do have 4 rushing scores, so maybe you have him as like more of a goal line back for them, Shawn?
Yeah, he could steal some there for sure. He's not going to catch too many passes, and I don't have that team that they're around 450 rushing attempts, and the quarterback's going to steal, almost 70 of them. So but if they get, they move the chains and they create more first downs, there's going to be more rush intense, and if they play from the lead, so the team's definitely on the rise, and they could push a lot higher offensively if everything clicks. They got so much talent at receiver and tight end.
Yes.
So
yeah. And I think you said it true here. Is like they're just so much better, I think, than all the other teams in this division. They might blow these teams out and everyone can kind of cook here. Moving on to the receivers, you have do you have Ridley over Kirk here? I'm trying to see here. I'm losing my spot. Yeah, Ridley over Kirk. Any concern about all the time that Ridley's missed over the last couple of years? You have him for 84 catches, 1,096 yards, and 9 scores.
Yeah, no, I just think he's a little more dynamic. He's, he can score in close, and make big plays, and he has the better combination for me than Kirk. Kirk had an impressive season. He fit really well, and I think he's not going to go away based on what he did last year in this offense. So I think Ridley was a better overall player. The time away is a factor, but he's been around the team long enough over the last couple of years that, I think he's going to be a nice addition, and there's a lot to like with him. And he's the missing link. I said they had 3 completions over 40 yards. He's the guy that could, help that tremendously in that area. And that would push that offense so much further if he can do that.
Yeah. And he's been going, Ridley's going as wide receiver 17, Kirk wide receiver 26. Kind of comparing the two here over at the full-time fantasy mid-stakes championship. Jody, I think, do you have those guys flipped in your rankings? Are you more of a Kirk than a Ridley guy?
I do. Actually, in my update, I've got them back to back, but I've got Christian Kirk one spot ahead. To me, it comes down to his role. I don't believe Christian Kirk's role will be impacted at all, simply because you're talking about a 75.5% slot rate, second highest among wide receivers last season. If anything, having Ridley will absolutely open up more targets for Christian Kirk. That said, Shawn, dead on about that. Last time we saw, remember, Ridley's played 5 games in 2 years, but the last time in 2020, we saw him 15.28 average depth of target. That's massive. Christian Kirk is 9.6. Same number for Zay Jones, 9.6 ADOT. So yes, if a receiver is going to, break out in this offense and become that massive touchdown score, it's going to be Ridley. I just, as of now, I'm expecting a little bit of rust. So, I have Kirk at wide receiver 23 and Ridley at wide receiver 24. I still think they're both very good wide receiver 2s, obviously with those projections. I'm just a little, below the market on Ridley. We'll see how he looks in August if he's 100% healthy. Shawn, again, just put in a great point, which is, he's been there a while, so he should be up to speed with everything. If we see it, then it's absolutely possible that, and we're talking about a minuscule difference between the two of them. So
sure,
that's possible with one little tweak of my projections that they flip and Ridley gets up, closer into my top 20.
And I think that big thing isn't necessarily the projections, Jody. It's the difference in ADP.
It comes down to your draft style. If you're looking,
right.
If you've already taken some chances and you need a safer option, then that's Christian Kirk. But if you're a guy or a gal that is someone that looks for massive upside at every pick, which hey, like Scott says, upside wins championships. If that's you and you got a choice between 2 of them, you should take Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, and like Shawn said earlier, they struggled with deep completions last year, or completions are over 40 yards. Like maybe Ridley is that. You got that big ADOT, like you were saying, Jody. Like maybe Ridley's going to be their deep threat. Maybe he has the bigger games, better for best ball. And then Kirk is more of a the regular weekly starting things. The thing I can't get over with Ridley is his ADP and like the 3-4 going around guys like Josh Jacobs, Breece Hall. I know we talked about him a little bit before the show, but like even Amari Cooper, Ramondre Stevenson, just guys that have Ramondre Stevenson is league winning upside with the touches he could get in New England. Josh Jacobs, same thing. He did win leagues last year. I just can't get over Ridley as wide receiver 17 there. Anyone else, Shawn, here in the receiving group? I know we've got Zay Jones, who's really had a pretty good year last year, and then had that explosive week 1 of the fantasy playoffs. For us last year, had a massive game. Zay Jones and then kind of fell back down to earth. Did you adjust his kind of projections at all because obviously Calvin Ridley showed up?
Yeah, he's the one that got impacted.
Odd
the
man
most.
out.
Yeah, he's the one that's gonna close to the line of scrimmage, overlap with Kirk. The tight end really progressed last year. So I think he's the one. He'll have some games and maybe score 10 points. Here and there and. Score some touchdown once in a while, but he'll be a tougher player at a time. I think the other 2 guys you probably pretty much figure you can start them each week, where Zay Jones is going to be more of a fill-in for me, a fantasy fill-in.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. He'll probably go undrafted a little bit maybe, and then, or he'll get dropped maybe early in the season, and then you're able to pick him up if you need to. And a lot of these Jags players, man, it's like even a guy like Dearness Johnson who showed flashes in Cleveland, like. If given the opportunity, injuries, a lot of these guys are talented. They just need an opportunity or an injury or something like that. The Jags will be in a lot of positive game scripts. Jimmy S in the chat. Do they look to be in positive game scripts? Absolutely, especially in these divisional games where they're going to be looking to blow these teams out. I don't think their defense is like exceptional. The Jags are, and so that gives them a chance to kind of playing these shootouts like they did with the Chargers in the NFL playoffs last year. Got behind big, then came storming back. So, but yeah, I like a lot of these guys. The guy that I loved last year, and he's kind of going a little bit higher this year, is Evan Ingram. You have him for 75 catches, which is great for a tight end, 784 yards and 5 scores. Another good season out of Evan Ingram. What did you see there when you were crunching your numbers?
I think just basically with Ingram is that he early in the year he was kind of disappointing, and for people that owned him in the past, they were like, "Oh man, I'm going to get the same type of guy." And then he really connected, and he started to make a lot of progress. Had some really nice games at 11, 162 and 2 touchdowns, 7 for 113, 7 for 93 and 1 late in the year. So he was a factor, and he just looked a lot better, in that offense, and he was, getting open, making plays, and playing physical. And I liked where he went. But he's this year he's definitely probably the third option in the passing game behind the 2 wide receivers. But he's ahead of Zay Jones for me. But he's just, if they throw the ball 625 times, he's going to get enough chances.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. Again, another just piece in this passing attack to be able to help Trevor Lawrence. So I think his ADP is fine. I like where he's at there. Jody, anything to add to Evan Ingram?
Yep, loved him last year. I mean, I tweeted repeatedly about Evan Ingram and a Doug Peterson offense. Big time fade for me this year, though. Let me just say that it comes down to usage. You're adding Calvin Ridley to this offense. Evan Ingram last year led all tight ends in slot snaps. That's not going to happen this year. Now you've got Zay Jones, who ran roughly a third of his snaps out of the slot. Other than that, it's going to be Christian Kirk in the slot. I think he's going to be more of inside an inline tight end more. And last season, Ingram 17.1% target share. I don't see any way that with these numbers, with adding Calvin Ridley to this offense, with adding a Tank Bigsby as a second running back, I don't see any way that he repeats that same sort of target share. And they also drafted Brenton Strange, another developmental tight end that I think that they'll be looking for next year. So I'll be fading Evan Ingram this year. I think he could still sneak in and be a quality tight end 1, but I don't think he's going to be able to replicate last year's numbers. Yeah,
someone's got to be the loser there when you add a guy like Calvin Ridley. I think it might take some targets away from Etienne, but I could totally see that happening for sure. But moving on to Tennessee Titans. Speaking of last but maybe even least, last and maybe least, we got the Tennessee Titans here. Not a ton to be excited about here as a team. We don't even know who the starting quarterback will be week 1. It'll probably be Ryan Tannehill, and that's what you have Shawn predicted played 90% of the snaps this season, 65% completion, which is good for the weapons that they do have. What did you see when looking at Ryan Tannehill as opposed to like a Will Levis or a Malik Willis there?
I mean, Tannehill is just a guy that's, ran the ball, decent, and been efficient in the red zone or close in scoring some touchdowns before last year. He's had some big games, but overall, even last year, his passing attempts were on the low side. They don't have great receiving options. I do like the developing tight end, but there's not enough receiving talent for Tannehill to reach a high ceiling as far as fantasy quarterback. So, I mean, the team I have for 21 passing touchdowns and him 19, and that's just not going to cut it in the fantasy market. But he's he's a veteran guy, and I think he can play. He just might not have enough tools to be as good as he was in the past.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, not much to say here other than for the fantasy weapons in Tennessee, we hope Tannehill's the starter. You have him for 65% completions opposed to 57% for Levis and Malik Willis here. So just moving on to kind of the big piece here in Tennessee, Derrick Henry. He's got for 324 attempts for 1,430 yards and 13 rushing scores. Another big year out of him, and you actually have him for 40 catches. What's the deal there? You think they're going to check down to the running backs a little bit more?
He really kind of pushed it up. Last year it was 33 for 398. That's a pretty good combination. I just, they figured out like this, let's just have him run, turn around, catch the ball, and then break tackles. So,
sure.
He just needs, 40 catches, 2.5 a game,
Yep.
That's, something like that. So I think that he's, capable. They haven't used him in the past, and they kind of mix somebody else in on third downs, but they don't really have somebody to kind of knock them off the block in that area. And Henry, he's getting older, but he's still a big physical receiver, and he breaks tackles. His offensive line isn't what it was before. We saw that his yards per rush dropped down a little bit, compared to, a couple of years ago. So, but if he makes big plays, he offsets some of that stuff. So, he's just a workhorse. Even if he gets 30 catches, that's more than he would. Before he was always under 20, and he scores touchdowns, and he gets. Last year, I think he was overlooked, and he finished pretty high, and I think he will be. But this year, he goes right in that Chubb zone, and Chubb plays a better offense. I think Henry might be able to out-catch him. Probably can out-touch him overall. But, if you're debating between the two offenses, Cleveland would be better than Tennessee. So, with Deshaun and stuff like that. So that's the close call there for, in at least the fantasy decision.
Yeah, he's going at the 2-3 turn. This might be, if he goes in the third round, well, he's definitely not going in the fourth round. I was trying to see if I could figure out Shawn's running back, and maybe it's Derrick Henry. Looking at these projections with 40 catches. 40 catches and 2 receiving scores. I'm willing to bet if he catches 40 balls, he scores more than 2 receiving touchdowns, because like you said, his big playability is gigantic. Jody, what's your take on Derrick Henry here?
I love the call with the career high in targets and catches for him. I mean, look, they don't have any established playmakers other than Treylon Burks. I mean, you could argue Kyle Phillips, but the offense, they also lost, Robert Woods, and not to mention Hassan Haskins just got arrested. There's a very good chance he's going to be gone from the team here. The other back behind him is, incoming rookie Tajay Spears. He had a career high of only 22 balls, at Tulane that he caught. So really there are no established running backs that can come in and take away to come in and get him off the field on third down in obvious passing situations. That they should see plenty of favorable game scripts. What do they predict? 6.5 wins, 7.5 wins is what Tennessee's projected to have. And a healthy Ryan Tannehill is probably not as bad as people think he is. He was 23rd in fantasy points per game last year. He's not someone I'm going out of my way to target, but I feel like if he can shake off the injuries that he had last year, he can still be, a viable fantasy QB2. Not a lot of upside, but again, he's probably not as bad as he's given credit for. And I don't, I think by having Will Levis slide into the second round, it kind of tells you that NFL teams don't view that he was ready to play in year one. I like Derrick Henry. I mean, other than like Shawn just hit on, he's lost about 1 yard per carry average off his career high. There's some concern with the offensive line, but I think in sheer volume, 1,500 rushing yards seems viable. And hey, if he can catch 40 balls, he's going to be, he's going to contend for top 5 fantasy numbers.
Absolutely. If he catches 40 balls, I mean, for sure. I mean, he will. And I'd be excited if he was able to catch. I mean, people forget Tajay Spears too doesn't have any knees. He has no meniscus or no ACL on one of his knees. He's not keeping Derrick Henry off the field. So I think I've been never, in the last 3 years, I've been a faded Derrick Henry guy, but that's with him going in the 5th, 6th overall. Now he's going in the third round. I really like Derrick Henry there. Moving on to the receivers, Treylon Burks is really the only guy worth talking about. Chris Moore, Westbrook Akine, Kyle Phillips, nothing really there. A lot of those guys are going undrafted. Shawn, you have Treylon Burks for 64 catches, 889 yards and 6 scores. Burks is a guy that I really, really liked coming out of college. He arrives with in the first round, kind of taking AJ Brown's spot. Showed some flashes last year as a rookie, but maybe just won't get the amount of targets that he needs to kind of reach that wide receiver 2 status.
Yeah, he was last year, was it at the end of training camp coming into the season, he was really getting a lot of knocks. He wasn't connecting and dropping balls, and you felt like he wasn't going to make a progression. And he I really slid in drafts, but he had some injuries in the midseason later. But he had that middle of the year where he had that 7 for 111 and a 4 for 70, and it looked like he was kind of coming on. He needs to stay healthy. He's a big receiver, kind of falls into that Deebo Samuel, where he might get some rushing attempts and get some some big plays and stuff like that. It just needs the offense to progress where he's, gets more scoring chances. So, but I think that he's a talented player, and I like where he was going. He just needs to stay healthy this year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think Burks could absolutely kill in those like play action, deep in breaking routes, like AJ Brown used to do there. I think that would be perfect for Burks if they can get that play action rolling with him there. And I think he's super talented. I think he was turning that corner, and then he got hurt. Jody, is he a guy in Treylon Burks that you're targeting? He's going wide receiver 34, right around Lockett, Tony, Mike Evans.
Yeah, at that point, you're getting an undisputed team wide receiver one who's guaranteed to lead his offense in targets and catches and yards, probably in touchdown receptions. That's pretty good value, at that particular time. And like Shawn said, he missed 5 games there in the middle of last season. When he came on, his best 4 or 5 fantasy performances came after week 11 last year. So he was starting to show, a little bit of what we thought of him coming out as a rookie. Like I said, wide receiver 34, at that point, you're getting a team wide receiver one, and not to mention, playoff schedule for the Titans. Again, I've been talking about strength of schedule here.
Yeah.
Full-time fantasy is something I'm working out. The Titans play the Texans twice in the fantasy playoffs this year, including week 15 and championship week 17. So, at that point, if you're able to get Derrick Henry, you're able to get Treylon Burks, and if he's been, a viable option for your fantasy team, it's, time to load up and, again, that should be, ideal matchup.
Yeah, no, for sure. And another guy, maybe the big three, right? Henry and Burks and Chig Okonkwo. Is it Chig season? Projected for 63 catches, 800 yards, and 6 scores. What do you love, Shawn, about the sophomore tight end?
He started to come on last year. He had a 4 for 68, 6 for 45, 1, 4 for 54, 3 for 42, and 1. He was really kind of doing well late in the season. His catch rate was 77%. He's, kind of a fast guy for a tight end. And, I actually made a comparison when I was writing a thing, that he went to Maryland, the same as Vernon Davis, maybe different size frame, but, a guy that really could progress. And in this offense, they really don't have much, and he could really emerge as their, number 2 receiving option. So I liked where he was coming, even though he didn't have that great of a resume in college. But I think that what he showed last year in the opportunity in this offense, I think it's pretty interesting, and he might have some really nice games. So I probably projected him. He's probably 660 for 80 in my write-up, but on my projections were, when you got to fit him in the box was, 61, 62 for 780 and 6 touchdowns. That's pretty aggressive. I don't know as far as where he gets drafted, but I think that's pretty high, probably higher than most, but I'm not 100% sure there.
Yeah, not sure that would put him in the projections, but where's he going here? Chig Okonkwo in the tight end 11. So that might put him up in the tight end. That would put him, I think, maybe ahead of where you have Evan Ingram too. Ingram had a couple more catches, maybe less yard, more touchdowns for Okonkwo. So somewhere between tight end 8, tight end 11 there.
He comes at 7 in the projections that I did. So
there you go. So to tight end 7. So that probably is maybe one of the highest in the industry. That puts him up there with Darren Waller, Kyle Pitts kind of range there. Jody, what are your Chig Okonkwo thoughts?
I've got him up there in tight end 1 territory as well. And keep in mind, Austin Hooper's no longer in Tennessee. Hooper had 60 targets last year. We saw that this offense was going to be Chig's down the stretch last season. He had, starting in week 13, he had 4 games with double-digit fantasy production. Pro Football Focus, very generous with his grades. He was the number 2 graded tight end last season. And he led all tight ends in yards per route run, and he led all tight ends in yards per reception. This is a guy with massive upside. Again, the Titans play a pretty favorable schedule. He's clearly going to be, the number 2 option in this offense outside of Treylon Burks. So there's a lot to like, and I'd love to see that Shawn, is bold on him and pitting him at tight end 7. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, he's only 7 projected for 3 catches. Less than Treylon Burks. So, I mean, they got some freak athletes here in Tennessee between Henry, Burks, Chig Okonkwo. They could do some damage there if if they can figure it out and they could be a team, Vrabel always gets the most out of his teams. I mean, they won all those games 2 years ago. They were like the worst one seed in like the history of the NFL in the AFC, and they got smashed.
That was the Vikings last year.
That's right. That's right. But I think he really does get the most out of his team. So this could be a surprising team. And, tonight it's been very kind of enlightening to look at these numbers and kind of compare them. I mean, Henry's higher than I thought he was going to be. Chig was higher, Etienne. So some guys that we really got to start thinking about as we dig into these numbers here. But yeah, the Titans could be a surprise team, and maybe the AFC South has a couple of surprise players kind of moving forward here that we have to consider. What are we talking about in the next week, guys? We finish up the AFC with the AFC West. Oh, baby.
Yeah, nowhere to go but up.
That's right. Nowhere to go but up. And listen, the AFC is the peak, the tippity top, right? With all the AFC West, with all the weapons we'll be talking about next week. And so, super exciting. Everyone's drafting. Excited to see everybody out in Vegas. I'll be out there this year for the main events, the FFWC, maybe earlier for some other stuff. Maybe some announcements coming out soon, but maybe I'll be out there in early to mid-August or something like that. But thanks everyone again sorry, go ahead, Shawn.
Did you sign a big deal somewhere? Is that what you're waiting to tell us?
No, not me. Not me. I don't sign the big. I let Scott sign and Ian sign the big deals. Those are the big guys. But for sure. But yeah, so we'll see everybody next week. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and because we're giving you guys premium content here for free on the YouTube channel. So for Jody and Shawn, I am Adam, and we will see you next week.